Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn, and our very special guest today is Sarah McCarthy, who's the author of A Blue Butterfly Inside the Diary of an Epstein Survivor, which is based on her close friendship with Epstein's abuse survivor, Juliette Bryant. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on, Andrew.
No problem. It's a little bit of a delay. Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina,
Those
Eastern
hamster
Standard
wheels are
Time. Can you hear
those
me
hamster wheels are
properly?
going pretty slowly, Will. Well, what I'll do, I'll give you enough time to do that. Let's start off then with how that sort of relationship started. You know Juliette Bryant. How do you know her?
She's been a good friend of mine for around 15 years now, but she actually endured her abuse in silence for almost 2 decades. It was only after Epstein's arrest that she came out with her story and she told people that she had been abused by him, which was in 2019.
And why did she pick you to tell the story rather than herself revealing it?
She has revealed her story. She's spoken on many podcasts. She was on the BBC documentary House of Maxwell. She got a full 7 minutes in the final episode. She's been interviewed by the Daily Beast, and she's spoken out a lot. What's interesting is the press don't really want to pick up on her story because it turns the entire Epstein story on its head. They are always focused on the sex trafficking part of things. So Juliet has revealed that that is not what he was doing. She said she was never trafficked to any other men and never saw any other woman being trafficked to any other men either. They were only abused by Epstein. He was doing something else. This story has been confirmed by attorney Brad Edwards, who has represented around 200 Epstein victims. He said only a small fraction of those girls were being trafficked, and only a small fraction of the men were taking up Epstein on that offer. There was something more that was going on here.
Right now, obviously, it's a deeply personal story. As you say, she's spoken separately, but wanted you to write this in your book, Blue Butterfly. What inspired you to write this deeply personal yet investigative story?
Well, when I heard her story, I knew it had to come out. Juliet's story is unique because when she was trafficked to New Mexico in June 2004, she woke up naked on a laboratory with a female doctor operating on her abdomen without her knowledge or consent. And this is a story that other people do not know. Other victims have not had this. It was a very real flashback that she experienced. And she believes that her eggs were being harvested.
So, as you say, this is a story which we haven't really heard from the other victims. You say that it turns the Epstein narrative on its head. What makes her experience so different to the other survivors' accounts, and why don't the other survivors tell a similar story?
Well, I believe that through telling Blue Butterfly, more survivors will come forward with evidence of Epstein's medical abuses. So when Juliet was in New Mexico, three things happened which were unusual. Epstein never sexually abused her. He took her into a small room and he gave her what she described as a pelvic exam. Then he examined her in an almost medical way. And then she had this awful flashback of waking up in a laboratory. She can describe it very clearly. The doctor had long brown hair, dark hair tied up in a ponytail. She was young. She had beautiful skin. She also reassured Juliet when she saw that she was awake, saying, "Calm down, everything's okay." So she could really describe the room, etc., and what happened. After that, she had a scar a couple inches just above her pubic bone and a small circular scar that was red and inflamed after that trip. What's interesting is I did a podcast a couple of days ago. You must know Sean Atwood. And during that interview, he gave me information that another survivor said that Ghislaine Maxwell offered her money for her eggs. And she didn't want to supply them, and Ghislaine offered increasingly higher amounts for her eggs. So that basically corroborates Juliette's belief that her eggs were being harvested.
And you say
Considering
increasingly
that the
higher
press
amounts.
named
Can you
Zoro.
give us an indication of the amounts that were being talked
Yeah.
about?
I listened to her podcast. I haven't spoken directly with her because this has just come out in the last couple of days, and she revealed on the podcast $1 million. Yeah.
Okay, so $1 million. So how did Juliet then, as a young model from South Africa who you knew previously as a friend, how did she first get entangled in Epstein's network, and what tactics did he use to lure her in?
He had a very standard modus operandi. So on the 26th of September 2002, he flew into Cape Town on his Boeing 727 with a high-profile entourage, which included Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, and Chris Tucker. That same evening, Juliet was having some drinks with some friends in a bar. She was approached by a very beautiful American model who told her, I'm here with an American billionaire. He has links to Victoria's Secret. He can launch your modeling career instantly. And would you like to meet him? She described him as the King of America. So that very evening, Juliet went along to the restaurant where Epstein was having dinner with Bill Clinton and Spacey, etc. When they walked in, they were all having a meal, their mid-meal, but they stood up and they met them. She said when she met Bill Clinton, he held onto her hand for a long time while he was talking to another person at the table, and it made her feel very uncomfortable. She was then told the next morning that Epstein really liked her. He wanted to see her modeling portfolio. She was invited to a speech that morning, the next morning, the 27th of September, and she watched Clinton say his speech on HIV/AIDS, and then went back to the hotel they were staying, which is the Cape Grace. And there, Epstein had set up a fake modeling casting for her using 3 girls that were in his network. And they all looked at her portfolio and her photos, made comments on them, and then, oh, he would love to see you. They showed her through to another room where Epstein then profiled her. He asked her all the questions. What is your relationship like with your father? What is your financial situation like? Do you have a boyfriend, and do you have any daughters? And in hindsight, that was him profiling her to see if she would be a suitable candidate.
And it's a suitable candidate for harvesting the eggs. I mean, you talk about the diary. It reveals a chilling encounter at Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. You mentioned this, that she woke up in a laboratory under medical examination. Can you describe in further detail then what she experienced and why she believes her eggs may have been harvested? And also, in light of the current revelations in the last few hours, why she wasn't offered similar large sums of money for such medical procedures?
Well, that's a very good question. I pose that in the final conclusion of Blue Butterfly. Juliet has received compensation for the sexual abuse she suffered at Epstein's hands, but nothing from the medical abuse because it's very difficult to prove. But I'm hoping that Blue Butterfly will prove that. And I'm really hoping that further evidence will come to light that will reveal these medical crimes. When you look at Epstein's interests, he was very interested in elite eugenics. In around 2000, he started telling all his associates he wanted to seed the human race with his DNA. Specifically, he wanted to impregnate up to 20 women at a time at Zoro Ranch. And he was also inspired, according to The Guardian, by Robert K. Graham's Repository for Germinal Choice, which was a sperm bank for Nobel laureates. that Graham put together in 1980. In order to shield this program from public scrutiny, he ran it out of a bunker in his backyard in San Diego, very similar to what was happening at Zoro Ranch, I believe. So this program continued for about 2 decades, despite a lot of controversy. Apparently, there are only a few Nobel laureates actually ended up donating. One of them, a journalist uncovered, was William Shockley. He devoted the latter part of his life to being to racist ideology, basically. He was also a eugenicist. So this is an overriding theme within Epstein's circle, eugenicists and racism. I believe that when that program was closed down in 1999, it was around the same time that Epstein was expanding his facilities at Zoro Ranch. So while the press have reported that the Nobel laureate sperm was incinerated, I believe it could have been simply transported to Zoro Ranch, and this eugenics program could have continued.
Okay, no, very, very interesting. And we'll dig deeper into that. As I say, there's a little bit of a delay, and it looks as though your AI are generated in terms of the responses, but I'm sure that's just to do with the hamster wheels with the connection. But I want to dig a bit deeper into the sort of daily life, if you like, for Juliet on Epstein's private island. Talk to me about what you know about that, and also how he maintained control over her and the other girls.
Yes. So daily life on the island, I asked her what she did. She said she would jump on a trampoline in the sea. And that when I did the research, I think Virginia Giuffre also mentioned that he had a trampoline in the sea. Apart from that, she wasn't really allowed to swim in the sea. He wanted to maintain control over the girls a lot of the time. So he needed them to be around and have a constant eye on them. They weren't allowed to just walk out the front door and go and explore the city, for example. But on the island in particular, they had ATVs, and she used to drive around the island on an ATV. She found disposable cameras in the kitchen on the island, and she took some photographs of herself there, along with another survivor that she befriended. And the two of them would walk around the island, lie by the swimming pool, that sort of thing. I think there were far fewer parties than everybody thinks were happening. Epstein was quite reclusive, and in the evening, he liked to watch a movie. So he would have one girl sit on one side and another girl sit on another side and watch movies in the evening.
And what sort of movies were they?
She described watching The Rock on one instance, and another instance, she said they watched Pearl Harbor, and that's because she met famed movie producer Michael Bay when they were at Zorro Ranch. He was there.
Now, you mentioned obviously that she met a number of high profile characters, and we obviously have to be very careful about defamation and so on and so forth, and make sure they have the right to respond. But can you share what she revealed about those encounters and how they fit in with Epstein's operations?
Yes, well, she met a lot of scientists when she was there. And one person in particular, high profile person she met, which ties into the story of what happened to her at Zorro Ranch, was she was taken by Epstein along with another survivor to go and meet the then governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson. They came out and met her and the other survivor, had a look at them, and Juliet had the uncanny feeling that they were appraising her for some reason. Yes. And then they met them, went back into the office. Epstein had about a 5 to 10 minute meeting with them. They came out and they drove home. So she's unsure why she was taken to meet the governor of New Mexico. But this ties into what happened to her there. I believe that there was some program that they were running. He is now since deceased. We're not sure who his right-hand man was at the time. But there are people out there that would know what he was doing. And I really hope again that someone will come forward and give more information.
Yeah, and I think it's so important in these conversations, and it's very easy for people just to latch onto the sensationalism, getting one side. But as we say, all we're trying to do is get to the truth. It's a side that isn't widely spoken about. They always talk about the abuse that was suffered by the girls, and that's been established. This side is not talked about so much. Did she tell you anything about Epstein that no one else has revealed?
She told me a couple of anecdotal things. He told her that in his youth, he was a taxi driver and that he used to give girls free rides in exchange for sexual favors. She also mentioned another conversation that he had. Epstein was a notorious name dropper, so he would often bring up famous people's names in conversation. He would often say, I've just been on the phone with Clinton or with Bush. Apparently, once Michael Jackson called him, and he heard, Michael Jackson's high-pitched cadence, and it was a joke. But apparently, it wasn't. Michael Jackson was thinking of moving to Palm Beach, and apparently called Epstein to say, could he see his residence? But again, that doesn't mean that he was involved in anything nefarious. It was confirmed that Michael Jackson's name came up with another.
And it is, as I say, people who are not here to defend themselves. It's so important, and this is front and center, including of a £10 billion, $10 billion litigation suit, which is why it's so important to be cautious in these instances. But this is a particular angle where, as I say, we're getting one side of the report. Why do you think he was so obsessed with neuroscience, AI, and controlling the human mind?
That is the million-dollar question, Andrew. So Epstein was fascinated with the mind, specifically around 1998. That was a key year for him. He joined Harvard's Committee on the Mind, Brain, and Behavior Initiative. And with this position, he would have got a front row seat to any advances in neuroscience. He also hired that same year a neuroscientist as his science advisor. He courted scientists that were specifically psychologists, psychiatrists, neuroscientists, and cognitive scientists. He was fascinated with how the mind worked. He constantly quizzed Juliette and gave her riddles to solve. And he said to her, your mind works very differently to other girls' minds. When Juliette got back from New Mexico, she was not okay. She had severe panic attacks. She was hospitalized 10 times, and she said something happened to her there that affected her mind. She believes that Epstein was involved in some type of mind control procedures with the girls. And that would make a lot of sense because they were back. He was a different type of abuser. He didn't keep them chained up in a cellar somewhere. They were constantly going back, and I believed he could have performed some sort of psychological operation on them where they believed that he was their savior, for example, and would constantly go back to him. That, in cult-like environments, there are these instances where people are broken down psychologically and built up again. And his was a cult-like environment.
And you've written about this. I mean, this is a sort of fascinating insight, if you like, a very different light on the Epstein story about these underground facilities, possible underground facilities at Zoro Ranch and Little St. James's. I'm always interested in the evidence, because that's what you always have to back these things up with. And any further evidence that you can provide regarding that. And also, why has the FBI never raided Zorro Ranch?
Exactly. Why have they never raided the ranch? I believe there were underground facilities there. Two YouTubers did do some research. They wanted to go and view the ranch with pretending to buy it. but they weren't allowed to, they wouldn't have been able to film their documentary because they had to sign a non-disclosure agreement if they went to go and see it. There's contractors who have worked in underground facilities, supposedly building them for a strip club. And the contractors said that they were checked on every 3 minutes by staff to see what they were doing. Maria Farmer, one of Epstein's first survivors, she had an encounter with him in about 1996, said that Epstein has underground facilities and tunnel systems underneath all his properties, and she knows that because he told her so. He was more loose-lipped at that time. As time went on, he realized that he had to be more quiet and more cautious in what he revealed. But there were underground on the actual plans for Zoro Ranch, there were underground layers. I don't know how deep they went. Maria Farmer also spoke of rooms filled with computers, and she said why anyone would need so many computers in one room is beyond her. So what was he doing? There was something else. It wasn't just trafficking girls. The YouTubers also found that Epstein sat on a board for a company, and I think it was called Life Shield Bunkers. And if you look at their website, they do these underground bunkers of many layers, and he was connected to that company. When they called to speak to somebody, they were quickly cut off. So there's obviously some connection there that they did not want to speak about. So I believe that he not only had underground facilities at Zoro Ranch, but also on his island.
Okay. And it's so important, as I say, we want to keep shining a spotlight on this. There's a lot of discussions about the Epstein files. Everybody's always focused on the appalling sexual abuse and what's revealed in those files. Do you think those files will also have information about this other aspect?
That's hard to say. I really don't know. I think he was recording everything. Juliette saw cameras in his New York mansion. There was a camera or a media room, which had hundreds, not hundreds, 40 screens or so that she described, with camera angles on all the bedrooms and all the bathrooms, which is a huge invasion of the girls' privacy. So he was recording things. Maria Farmer also said he had the same system set up in all his residences. So there could have been famous names that have been recorded. I doubt he would have recorded any of the medical things because he wouldn't have wanted that. He wouldn't have wanted that around. But who knows? There may be some information buried in those files.
So just looking at this in sort of logical terms, I mean, the suggestions previously about famous people having massages and so on and so forth, and having sex with the girls, and a number of famous names have been mentioned. In terms of the medical experiments, are there any suggestions that any of the celebrities or third parties have been involved with that as well?
Not celebrities. I wouldn't think that they would be included, but I would think that, Epstein specifically funded scientists. If he was compromising celebrities, what would stop him from compromising scientists and getting them to do his bidding, to be involved in these medical experiments, or specifically the mind control aspect? He was definitely getting information from them. I believe that through his funding and grants, Epstein could have been steering science and controlling the narrative.
Okay. Now you mentioned about Juliet's mental state after the final trip to New Mexico. How does her story point to a possible MK ultra-style mind control experiment, and what parallels did you find with CIA programs?
Well, before Epstein sent her back to South Africa after the first trip, he brought her into his office in Palm Beach and he sat her down on a chair. And she said that conversation was very uncomfortable because he directly threatened her. He said to her, "Work for the CIA and I have your family on a list." Initially, she didn't know what he was talking about. Her view of the CIA is what Africans will get in the movies and from television. that they are there to protect the American public. But if you had certain things like MK Ultra and Project Monarch and all these nefarious things that the CIA were involved in, you can understand that the CIA has a shadow side. And the CIA, if you go to CIA, you can look at all the old MK Ultra type experiments that were done on the declassified documents. So in addition to MK Ultra, there were about 150 sub-programs. The one that I found very interesting was how the CIA was able to program two teenage girls, they said around the age of 19, to detonate a simulated bomb using a code word over a telephone. And why I found that interesting is that when Juliette then did go back to South Africa, Epstein used to call her every day on the phone initially. He could have been giving her some sort of trigger word to ensure her compliance. After a while, it went down to about every third day that he used to call her, but he was definitely checking up on her.
So do you believe then? I mean, it's as I say, sensational claims about this sort of side. But do you believe that he was working for a larger network, possibly tied to intelligence agencies?
Absolutely. Well, for my book, I was lucky enough to get an exclusive interview with Ari Ben-Menashe. He is a former Israeli military intelligence officer, and in his capacity working for Amman, he worked directly with Robert Maxwell. He was handler, and he said that during the Iran-Iraq conflict, Israel was selling weapons to Iran, and Maxwell was the conduit through which the payments were made. He also met Epstein in this capacity. Epstein used to pass through Maxwell's offices at the Mirror Group in London on his way to and from Israel. And it was higher level senior Israeli officers that included in the ongoing arms deals with Israel. When I asked Ari Ben-Menashe if it was possible that Epstein could have worked for the CIA as well as Mossad, he said, absolutely, it wouldn't be surprising. Even if they didn't work together, they had contacts with each other. So I believe that he was working for both the CIA and Mossad. He was definitely part of a larger network. And these medical crimes that he was performing was on behalf of his superiors. He
Okay.
was
Well,
not
again,
operating alone.
the more evidence that we can have and to counteract that or to support that, it's an open invitation for people to come over because I always say that sunlight is the best disinfectant. One of the conspiracy theories which is out there is obviously regarding the stories of Epstein's death. Some say that he's not dead at all. Does Julia's perspective shed light on those theories that he might still be out there? And what's your own personal view based on evidence that you've seen?
Well, I haven't only interviewed Juliette, I've interviewed 5 different survivors. Uh, an overriding theme with all of them is none of them believe that he's dead. They all say he was too powerful. And these girls differ in their perspective on everything. While Juliet does look at the deeper things, she's more awake and aware of what is happening in the world. Some of the girls are much more conservative in their viewpoints, but they all believe that he could be alive. What is interesting is that Epstein spoke to one survivor and said he was having himself cloned in Mexico. Leila Nally, a journalist, called every single phone number in the little black book until he got to this girl who said Epstein was into cloning, human cloning, after the Dolly thing got shut down. Bill Clinton, his close associate, banned the use of federal fund human cloning, but not private. So if he had his own medical facilities, if he had all the money that he had and access to scientists, what would stop himself from having himself cloned? Then you have to look at the external footage of his prison cell that was cut and two 59 minutes taken out of that cutting. What happened that time? Did they access his cell and put a clone in his place? It's possible. These people are very powerful and capable of doing a lot more than we think.
But putting a clone, I mean, it would have to be the same age and so on and so forth. So again, people would have to explain how that works. It is purely speculation, but again, important questions to ask. Why did you pick the title Blue Butterfly?
Well, Blue Butterfly holds a significant weight with survivors. Firstly, Juliet's diary from that year, 2002, when she was recruited, Blue Butterfly on the cover. She's an artist at heart. She actually created the diary herself and pasted that blue butterfly on the cover. And inside that diary, it's not a journal, it's got a lot of notes, questions to ask Jeffrey. It's got her packing list, it's got flight details, it's got the actual uh, address of the block that she went to go and stay, which was central to Epstein's sex trafficking operations in New York. It's got all of those facts and details in there. But in addition to her having a blue butterfly on her cover diary, Virginia Giuffre chose the blue butterfly as a symbol for her sex trafficking charity. Ransom decided to tattoo a blue butterfly on her forearm. This was actually all picked up by Sigrid Macaulay, the lawyer in charge of supporting a lot of these girls pro bono. And when you look at the butterfly symbol, it also goes into mind control, etc. So it is a significant symbol, and it just seemed like the right title because of Juliet's affinity with the blue butterfly.
And how's Juliet now?
She's doing well. She's doing much better. I think she's happy that her story is coming out and being corroborated by, I've done a large investigative journey into what happened to her. And yeah, she still suffers a little bit from the trauma around being constantly triggered by seeing Epstein in the news. I think it's not easy for any of the survivors. None of them chose this path. And it's something that they can't escape because Epstein's name is constantly coming up in the press and in the news.
Well, I think it is so important, as I say, this particular aspect to shine a spotlight on this side because people always talk about the sex trafficking and the convictions there, which that they stand up, they've gone through the relevant process, and indeed he pleaded guilty to particular crimes. This is the first time it's really being looked at, if you like, in a sort of major way about the medical side. The connection hasn't been very favorable for us now, or maybe external forces trying to stop this conversation. It's very important this conversation continues. We'd like, if possible, it'd be good to get Juliette on the show. Would she come on with you?
I think she may, yes. She's in a different time zone at the moment. I'm in Charleston, Eastern Standard Time, and she's in South Africa. But perhaps when we are both back in South Africa, then we would be able to come on your show again with a better internet
Oh
connection.
no, that
I think
absolutely. We'll
I
we'll
think
make
the
sure that
internet connection in South Africa is better than in Charleston. I'm surprised.
happens.
I'm surprised to see
I
that.
have people from all over the world, more platforms than Paddington. We managed to get connections in the strangest places, but we will make that work. It is such an important message. I'm really
Yeah.
grateful for you to coming on. Let's have a word with Juliet. We will get her back on the show. But for now, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for your time, Andrew. I really appreciate it.
Take care.